everyone. Thank you for attending the Workforce and Business Development Committee meeting, our virtual meeting. I'm glad that we're able to join today, and I have with me Tracy Dotson. Oh, excuse me. I'm so used to having people in the room with me. So those in the room with me, can you introduce yourself? And then I'd like for committee members to introduce themselves as well, starting with my vice chair.
Good day, Mr. Chair. This is your Vice Chair, Tarek Bakari, representing the great 6th District of Charlotte.
Boy, I like the new look, Vice Chair. I like it.
Boom.
Bingo. Council member from District 4.
Good afternoon. This is Renee Johnson, City Council, District 4.
Hello, Renee.
Hi. How are you?
How you doing? Council member at large.
Happy Monday, Dimple Ashmara at large.
Hello, Dimple.
Hi, James.
And I just text our great leader from District 2, Councilmember Graham, so he'll be joining us shortly. Now in the room, who have to keep me honest today, I'll start with a young lady to my far right.
Holly Eskridge, Assistant Economic Development Director.
Hey, Donata Jackson. I am with the Office of Constituent Services.
Tracy Dotson, Assistant City Manager.
Okay. Does everyone have a copy of the agenda in front of them? Okay. All right. So we have 5 items on the agenda, and 2 of them I know are vital, that some of the committee members have had a lot of discussion about. And I have to let me start off by thanking the staff for putting together a great agenda for us. And those I know in the minority community, small business, thank you for signing in today. And so I'm going to turn it over to Tracy as we talk about the State of Economic Development Department. Tracy?
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Mitchell. I wanted to start today basically with reminding everybody that we, over the past 6 weeks, have really been pivoting and had to reorganize new strategies based on the world that we live in today. However, there's still a lot of business that is still going on around economic development. And I just wanted everybody, before we jump into kind of this repositioned small business initiative, I wanted to take a second and remind people of our 4 areas and a little bit of what's going on in those areas that's similar to small business and COVID, but it's also a little bit different. So I'm going to start with that slide. It's got a lot of text on it. But I wanted you to see the impact of everything else that we still have going on. And if I start at the top left with prospective businesses, we are currently chasing, we have and negotiating 6 current projects. We have 5,100 jobs that we are chasing with almost $1 billion of investment. So that is in light of everything that is going on right now. 600 new jobs landed in Charlotte. We're also coming up with a business recruitment strategy within the COVID-19 recovery. We have several other real estate projects that continue to move forward. The discussions around the transportation center, as well as Charlotte Gateway District redevelopment. Moving kind of counterclockwise around business innovation, Holly's team has been doing a tremendous amount of work to help us pivot around small business. And that is the Small Business Recovery Task Force, that's the Open for Business Mentorship, Micro Business Relief Fund, the overall campaign that we'll talk about today, and the Survive and Thrive, but also thinking about Amp Up Summer Series, the Small Business Month of May, and efforts around there, and then continuing on to ongoing support with all of our partners as everybody is adjusting to this new world. So tremendous amount of work that she and her team have been doing. If I keep going counterclockwise to the talent development, I want to remind you all that we started a pilot program with the Opportunity Hiring Grant. That's seen a lot of success, and I think even leading to some potential new business opportunities in Charlotte. Emily has also been working on what we'll call Renew, develop and launching it. It's similar to a piece, but another piece. We can talk about it a little bit later. New workforce strategies with the Charlotte Executive Leadership Council, and we're also launching a tech talent study. And then all the way at the top right, under Great Places, we have 12 potential P3 projects going on, 6 TIGs and 6 CIP projects. That includes a Ballantyne to ones we're looking at in NODA, Midtown, University. We have a whole new corridor revitalization effort that is going on that the manager started to unroll last Monday night. Urban Maine moving into a next phase. Eastland Mall, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that continues to move forward. All of this is leveraging nearly $3 billion of investment.
Yep, well, contain yourself. When she say Eastland Mall, I see you jumping up and down. Contain yourself now.
So I wanted everybody to know that, again, while we're living in this new world, there's so many things that we had going on pre-COVID that still continue to go on that are really good for our community. And I think some more of those you'll even hear about tonight with Ballantyne on the council agenda.
Thank you, staff. Councilman, the representative from District 2, can you please announce yourself, sir?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Malcolm Graham, Charlotte City Council, District 2. Sorry for the delay.
That's all right, sir. Thank you, Councilman. Okay. Tracy said thank you, and you mentioned the new state we're in right now. So I thank staff for all the learning. I mean, working from home and still getting the job done. I know it is a challenge, so thank you all so much. Now, Small Business Task Force update. Your new pet project.
So this obviously has been a tremendous amount of time and effort, not just from economic development, but citywide coordination, working with a lot of other departments on some really creative ideas. What I'm going to roll out for you today is pretty lengthy. It's the same thing that we'll roll out to the task force tomorrow. It is a comprehensive strategy, which is why I can't kind of pull it apart, that we want to get feedback from as we think about how to use our COVID relief money, but also as we start to think about how we help small business not just survive what's in the world for them today, but really coming out of this, pivot and thrive. So, like I said, we've been working around the clock on this, and small business truly is our backbone of our community. And we've been, as a team, looking for solutions that are going to help today and into tomorrow. And this team, again, internal as well as external. If we can go to the next slide, please. A little bit of a snapshot. We know what's happening today. Our GDP fell 4.8%. The U.S. economy's key drivers accounting for 2/3 of consumer spending. The total output fell 7.5% in March. Initial COVID impact, economically sensitive revenues, this has been extreme. In March, occupancy tax was down 70%, food and beverage down 56%. In April, the unemployment rate was at 14.7. We think that will obviously go much higher. That accounts for 1 million unemployment claims in North Carolina. So obviously we're in uncharted territory. And I think one of the things that we've learned, if we can go to the next slide, is that while we think we might know the answer today, this is an evolving thing. And it requires a lot of discussion and learning from one another. Market experts, but also hearing from small businesses and hearing from all of you. And so today we've responded by doing these open discussions, some interactive forums, research around the country and best practices, and that's best practices to how cities are using their relief funds, to best practices for opening up. You know, the hot topic of today is not going to be the hot topic of tomorrow, and staying on top of that research. And then also staying in close coordination with our partners around the city that are doing some of these same things. Next slide, please. The main thing on what we heard, companies, overwhelmingly, businesses needed to be connected to the right solutions for financial support, reopening best practices, and networks. That goes without saying. I think we've all heard that. But they also need help with branding and marketing their businesses. We've heard a lot of people say, I just didn't have an online platform. How do I pivot to that quickly? Even the Open for Business initiative that we rolled out last month came out of a request from the original Small Business Forum, which is how do we connect with each other? How do I tell somebody I'm open for business? Next slide. These are going to probably be hard to read for a lot of people, but 2 quotes, a little bit of what we've heard. The top one really talking about that feeling of being vulnerable. A lot of people feel like I've got to figure this out on my own, and having live Q&A sessions have a lot of people has resonated with people and seem to really like. And then the other one was kind of where we came up with the Open for Business campaign, which is a brand to unite small businesses together, but also inform and educate them. Who's open? What are best practices? What are resources in our community and elsewhere? So, with that, let's go very quickly to what we've done. And what we've done so far, and I've hit on a little bit of this, is created this Open for Business brand, and it's an icon of solidarity for small business that we can proudly display, and we intend for it to evolve. Again, today it was an idea of connecting businesses to businesses or telling somebody you're open for business. We have established weekly mentorship series where we focus on different topics and bring panel of industry experts. I'll hit a little bit more on this later. We also launched this interactive dashboard in the Open for Business campaign, and the Micro Business Relief Fund the council approved last month for $1 million to look at micro businesses in our business corridors. The mentorship series, as I mentioned, last week we did digital marketing. I thought it was very fascinating. Again, people weren't talking about the need for money as much as connections to resources that can help them figure out how to reposition online. How do you grow in Instagram? How do you grow followers? I learned a lot personally. Tomorrow's series will be on best practices on reopening. And you can see there a list of several others that we've talked about. Next slide. The Open for Business dashboard I've hit on a couple of times. The intent we have is to connect businesses to let citizens know who's open, who's pivoted their business. I find myself constantly checking which restaurants are either open, and it changes on a regular basis. We have over 500 registered businesses, almost 20 different categories, and over 5,000 views. We really want this to keep growing, and we'd like for this to be something after post-COVID that we can keep to unite small businesses and let our community know who's open, who's out there, and business to business. The Micro Business Relief Fund, this would be $1 million, as I mentioned, in grants for companies that are 5 employees and under. 100 micro grants roughly would be, and then at $10,000 a piece. It could be more than that, and if we don't do $10,000 for everybody. We have taken 327 applications. They kind of stopped the application process. They're reviewing all of those now. We'll go through a process on those and hopefully have money out soon. Have you heard a date?
Yes, so emails are going out asking the businesses that have applied to submit the formal documentation that's needed, the listicle review, and then we have a city team that needs to review them too, because just to make sure CDBG eligibility takes place, and we're within the federal guidelines, and then routing with lists, so the checks would be cut just right after that. So hopefully if we can get that moving this week, then we could cut those checks next week.
Thank you, Holly.
I think one other layer that we will put on this is that it's an equitable distribution through our corridors, from geography, company types, things like that. Next, going into, this is our Open for Business, but a little bit more of what we're going to talk about today, which is this larger strategy around an evergreen initiative to help small businesses survive in today's new world and thrive in whatever's to come next. It's so important that this is a cohesive strategy. We will talk about a lot of the different initiatives under this strategy. if we walk away with anything today, there's no pride of authorship in some of these strategies, but I think the important thing is that we don't get so focused just on today and the survive, that we really do have a comprehensive strategy, because Charlotte will come out so much stronger. We'll help our companies survive today, but come out stronger tomorrow.
I know my vice chair is smiling on the Thrive part. So, Tark, let me see your face. Make sure you're happy.
Well, let's get to those slides, but I feel already happy, Mr. Chair. I'm feeling directionally happy right now.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Hi, Mayor.
Our Mayor just joined us.
Hey, guys.
Mayor.
So now let's evolve into what's next. We've talked a lot about what we've done. Let's talk about where we're going. Go to the next slide. As I mentioned, survive and thrive, and this is really a quilt work of different initiatives that focus on today, expanding programs, connecting to partners, creating an umbrella ecosystem that evolves into tomorrow, and that's keeping the momentum and helping businesses pivot. Keep going. We have organized this under a couple of buckets. I want everybody to see how this might start one way today under survive and evolve and thrive. Maybe it might be something completely different. But we have the Open for Business campaign. It starts as a website, but it really evolves into a platform. The ecosystem support is about our partners today and connecting people where our community has come together. There's a tremendous amount of great work that's going on out there from our partners to help small businesses, and we want to help connect people to those resources. And then later on, it evolves into how our community is together, how we have united to come together even more. Access to capital goes throughout, and then workforce is going to go throughout as well. Again, what this slide is, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we're going to go through each one of these, is these are the more specific initiatives. Again, understanding the broad buckets, no pride of authorship, but the most important is that we really think about this evolution of today into tomorrow. If we can keep going, we have the survive, and I'm going to just go ahead and let's go ahead into the next slide with the Open for Business website. As I've mentioned, this is something that the first phase of is a website that we're standing up. It's about reopening our state economy that started last Friday. Companies are experiencing some level of uncertainty, and they're looking for examples of lessons or strategies of what we've learned. How do we connect them to resources, and how do we connect them to their fellow entrepreneurs? So phase one will be the website, and then we'll continue to evolve that and build more things into that as time goes on. Phase two of the website will be the promotion of local businesses, also growing out that mentorship series we talked about, developing more business resiliency strategies, a job connector, a workforce program platform, and resources for recovery. So it will incorporate a lot of these initiatives that we're talking about here today. The website can be up as early as I think next week. This phase two piece comes in June. Ecosystem partner support. As I mentioned earlier, our community has come together and we're uniting in our efforts to help small business. We really want to help support our partners. I think they can help grow capacity faster than we can in starting our own initiatives in some ways. So if we can go to the next slide. Existing partners and grants. We have a lot of great partners that we have historically supported, and even some new ones that we would like to see. Again, they can if we can support them, they can grow their capacity faster to help more businesses. Some examples of those, Ready CLT, this is the evolution of support CLT. It's a lot of great work that Chad Turner and his team are doing. Central Piedmont has their Small Business Rebound program. The Women's Business Center and Prospera can expand their counseling operations for other small business support programs. We've heard a lot of other ideas. What I would encourage everybody is let's keep tracking all the ideas, all the other partner support, vet them, make sure that it makes sense under the COVID and regulations that we'll have under COVID relief funds. But that partner support is so critical in growing capacity and support for our small businesses quickly. Next slide, the business-to-business grants. I mentioned earlier, and I'll walk through more of an example of this, is that a program to help existing small businesses support other small businesses. As we mentioned last week in the digital marketing mentor series, we had consultants saying some people just need help setting up a website. Well, there's plenty of small businesses or individuals in our city that can help do that are looking for work right now. Can we kind of come up with a grant program that can help people get some of those resources, but also use existing resources in our community? And so the idea is that they're relatively small grants, up to $20,000, but they can help in digital marketing, financial planning, accounting, things like that, or even coaching to help these businesses survive and pivot. Access to capital, putting capital in the hands of small businesses that need it. And go to the next slide. The micro business grants, we already know this from our existing $1 million that we've put in. Micro businesses, there's from our records or research, 6,794 businesses in Charlotte that fall into this category. What proposal that we would make is to expand this program, continue to use LISC. It would be a little bit different than what we have now. We would expand it to citywide. We would get this current $1 million out the door and then almost in a way start over, but not in a timeline start over, where we would then be able to relax the CDBG fund guidelines that we had on the first round. We would give priority to micro businesses that have not received other federal, state, or local grants, and then the requirement would be that they must have 2 years of tax returns or show evidence of negative financial impacts on their business. Small business grants. This would focus on companies with 6 to 25 employees. By our research, this is about 3,668 small businesses in Charlotte that would qualify, that is employing over 81,000 people in Charlotte. And this would provide grants up to $25,000 with businesses from 6 to 25. One of the things that we know is that while $10,000 may be critical for a business of 5 or under, 25 is more of that sweet spot, in the 6 to 25,000 for real relief. Workforce and rapid response. Helping the small businesses is critical. We recognize that, but also how are we going to help the workers that have been displaced? And coming up with strategies that are immediate, that we feel like we can pivot, and then again can evolve into that Thrive strategy. We have to do something for the worker if we feel like 20% of our workforce has been impacted. So the first idea is around the CLT Career Pivot Boot Camp. And this is a stand-up portal on the Open for Business, and it's a boot camp, and it connects workforce partners, educational partners, and private companies that can quickly produce materials that would focus on identifying transferable skills. For somebody who might have worked in a restaurant for the last 10 years, maybe help them quickly pivot to go work in a call center. So it's going to focus on things like resume readiness, social media presence, learning about different industries, different places that they could actually consider to go, and quickly change in their career opportunities. The idea was that we could launch this in mid-June and carry it through the year. Job placement coordination. This outreach program to local companies to identify future job growth. And this would leverage partner relationships with the CELC and other businesses collaboratives to inform the future of work. Where are we going? And you can see on the slide, we could start this immediately in 8 weeks to gather data during this rapid change. But who's hiring? How do we best connect people looking for work to people that are hiring? Now I'm going to move over into the Thrive section. So this is, if you notice on this, we did put timelines for each initiative, but I want to make it clear that very intentionally did not put, Survive happens in 30 days, Thrive happens in 90 days, that kind of thing, because some of these initiatives we can start now. Some of them are intended to be around the Thrive component of it, but they overlap. There's a lot of gray in terms of timing and things like that of when things can start or we can start to stand them up. The Open for Business website, as I mentioned, this kind of initiative is evergreen. We would take it in a phased approach, but the phase 3 of the website could be more of that B2B dashboard, job connection, and a digital forum, and continue to grow that out. Talent development programs, and this is intensive career cohorts, and I'm going to give you 2 examples in these that we're thinking about. And the difference, we've had things like peace before, but where we're really focused on this, and it's not getting rid of peace, I want to be clear on that, but it's guaranteed job placement. And so it's cohort-based career development, but it's, again, trying to get to that guaranteed job placement. And we would want to look at technology, skilled trades, trade and logistics, workplace sanitation, and back office operations. If we look right now, job openings in logistics and distribution are over 1,000 that are listed online right now. Skilled trades, 361 jobs. Advanced technology, 1,219 jobs. Workplace sanitation is something that obviously we think will come out of COVID. So that gives you an idea of where we're looking at where there's job openings and how do we help people pivot. And so we would directly tie our training and employment opportunities through this job placement coordination and outreach.
Mayor? Oh, sure.
Would it
Mayor?
be okay?
Yes.
Because the piece was created with the idea of guaranteed job placement.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a problem. I don't know what components would be left of peace if we went into something where if I had the opportunity for a job placement versus a training, and that's what discourages people most, is that I just heard something on the radio this morning. I got trained for an HVAC, and they told me it would pay this much, and there were no jobs in that. And so I think this is a lot more flexible. So I would question why, you said not getting rid of peace, but if you've got something more effective.
I think it's a pivot on peace.
Okay,
is really where
that's
we're
fine.
going. I just, I know that
I understand.
a lot of people, we've learned from
it's
peace.
better. Peace is like, yeah.
We've learned, and now it is that guaranteed job placement, and so connecting not only the training, but the job.
That when you're training for a job, you're not going to school,
Right.
and then trying to look for a job.
Right.
That's
Right.
a big difference.
So if we can go to the next slide, an example would be the technology training program, where we expand technology programs to place residents in high-demand technology jobs. An example of this, and Councilman Bakari can speak to this, but WIN is an example of this in our community. 1,500 people applied for 50 positions in the current WIN class. And so guaranteed job placement, high demand career, good wages, good benefits. That's the goal. The other example is the Renew training program as a part of the American Cities Climate Challenge. This is a piece of this where we are launched last week an RFP that supports goals around renewable energy efficiency. So you talked about, Mayor, HVAC jobs. Similar in talking about that, if we've found that there are a lot of openings in that, again, making sure that the jobs are there, but launching this piece of it as well. Focus on that. Okay, next slide. Business innovation. And the B2C, Small Business Accelerator, is really it's a creative idea in thinking about retooling small business for a new normal. As we acknowledge, businesses are going to have to figure out how to pivot. I've had a lot of conversations over the past several weeks about how to go cashless. And a lot of businesses aren't necessarily entirely set up for that. What are the new technologies that are going to come out of this to help businesses? And this would be a virtual accelerator where you would lean on an existing organization like a Techstars to recruit approximately 10 companies to create technologies to specifically help small businesses here in Charlotte pivot, but also become more resilient. So Techstars does a concept like this around the country, but this one is a little bit different because the theme of it is really about helping Charlotte small businesses pivot. If you think about Charlotte, we talk about we're in the forefront of innovation and commerce. Here's a perfect example of how we can bring those two things together. They would create, we could quickly kick this off, but they could also help create the technologies. We'll talk about another grant program that then could be used to work with businesses in these technologies. So I'll connect it all for you in an upcoming slide. Excuse me. Next slide. The Resilient Restart Program, intensive resiliency and continuity planning curriculum for small businesses. Again, this is really thinking about, if you think about how we've done AMP Up in the past, and this is kind of growing AMP Up for resiliency and continuity planning so that should businesses ever find themselves in a situation like COVID-19 again, they're better prepared for it. Our recommendation is that half of these cohorts would be reserved for MWSBEs.
And this would come out of the city's training money?
This would come out of what we would do, or COVID relief money.
But I don't know that it would qualify for COVID relief if it has to be COVID, related to COVID industries. And I didn't know that you could designate within the COVID minorities.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll look at that.
So I think there are two things I would say about that. One, check out whether or not you can reserve for minorities and et cetera, et cetera. But the other thing about it, if it's a resilient restart program and you look at talking about a curriculum for small businesses, I wonder, you're supposed to be responding to the COVID specifically. So I want to make sure that this is a program that we may have to fund out of city money.
Yeah. And we've talked about how our strategies are, we're having to pivot our strategies that we
really
had into what makes the most sense for today. I'm sorry, Councilman Mitchell, did I cut you off?
No.
The Thrive Business Grants would go to the Innovate Business Grant, which is kind of the access to capital to launch new innovative strategies and tools. Again, this was about pivoting. So purchase new technology based on, again, going cashless or things like that, or better systems to keep better accounting. This is, again, building on that resiliency and that pivoting to come out of the situation that we are in right now. This grant could support technologies that came out of the B2C innovative initiative, but also work on things like other consulting services. How do I set up that website? How do I do those things to really allow them to pivot and procure the right technology to run their business? And then the Thrive Hiring Grant. We can go to the next slide. Sorry. This incentivizes companies to hire and put their residents to work, creates new jobs in our city that can provide opportunities to our unemployed residents, and offset the expense of hiring those who have retooled their careers and take new opportunities. So if you think about our Opportunity Hiring Grant, it's somewhat similar, but it's more focused specifically on people who were displaced with COVID, the COVID situation. Take us a couple weeks to develop it, and we could work it through December. Lastly, to round us out, we just wanted to share a testimonial of one of our small business partners, Renee from Central Piedmont. They've been a strong partner, and they've really stepped up to help small businesses and communities during this time. This is all about partnership and through this today, but also how we work together and emerge and grow from this coming out. And so we go last to next steps. I think the mayor raises a really good point that as we talk about these initiatives and we hear from you what you want to move forward on and the ones that we like, we're really vetting what we can use COVID, what we might reposition some of our existing funds for strategy, but we really want to rapidly deploy the capital to small businesses and resource. We think that's a first priority. Stand-up workforce readiness. Again, it's about those employees as much as that have lost their jobs and finding new jobs, as much as it is the small businesses, and then bringing new jobs to our city. And then again, the standing up this Open for Business platform that can be something that serves as a essential resource today, but is an evergreen kind of initiative to unite small businesses in our community, and then start to prepare and execute on Thrive initiatives. So that was a lot really fast, but I know we have a lot of things on our agenda.
Well, do we have any questions from any committee members? Okay, good. Okay. That was a lot. Trace and staff, thank you so much. And just FYI, we are taking these ideas to the Small Business Task Force tomorrow. So we wanted to get input from the experts as well. Councilmember Ashmere, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. So we had a town hall last week on small businesses, and Holly had presented from the city on small businesses grants and resources that are available. And the question that often came up was around businesses that are not able to get PPP or apply for other resources. How can they get help? So I think this Survive and Thrive program will certainly help those businesses who are not getting other resources. And in order to expedite that process, I understand that we have a third party who will be managing these programs. Is there a fee associated with those, and what percentage of the money is going towards fees?
Yeah, we are working right now on a breakdown per initiative, and that's for both of the grant programs that we highlighted under Survive, and what we're looking at under Thrive. But yes, if we use outside partners and outside resources, there are administration fees associated to them.
Okay, so once those fees have been presented to us, could you please share those with us so that we are taking that into consideration to ensure that we are directly, as much as possible, providing these resources in the hands of the small business owners. The second question I have about the technology program. I know TARP's group, Councilmember Bukhari's group, FinTech, does a lot of work around workforce development. So are we collaborating with his group or some others that are already doing technology workforce development work?
Yes, definitely. And again, this goes with the larger partner support. There's a lot of great things, and WIN is a perfect example of that, of what's going on in our community, where we don't need to recreate the wheel. We can rely on partners who already know how to do these and implement some of these programs to do that. So yes, we absolutely are working with Councilmember Bukhari and others in the community to develop some of these strategies.
That's great. I do know a single mother who went through their program and had great things to say, and she was able to get a job in financial services industry in entry-level technology roles. So I hope that we leverage some of their existing expertise that's already out there. So thank you. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dimple. Vice Chair.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dimple, as well, for those kind words. That means a lot. I was just going to make a quick statement. this has very much been one of those scenarios where staff and everyone you see in the committee, bar council, mayor, everyone and partners have been frantically working. It's been like the duck's legs underwater. I think a lot of people in this community have asked over the last 2 months, where is city council? What is city council doing? And the answer is a lot, but up until this point, we've kind of been partnering with a lot of other people in driver's seats, whether it's the health director who's done an amazing job, or the county who's leading with the Health and Human Services angle of COVID-19, or the state, or the feds. So the list goes on and on. We've been in a lot of supportive roles, but I would just say kudos to staff and everyone working on this, because this is the moment where the city's lead role has been waited for a long time, and that is the ultimate recovery, the jump starting of our economic system here. That is clearly in the city's wheelhouse. We are going to continue to partner with all those great other entities that I mentioned to move forward, but this is that opportunity for the city to do what it does best, which is re-jumpstart this economy. And what that needs right now is the fuel, which is workforce and particularly small business. And I think what you see here is a really fast, comprehensive strategy, not a one piece at a time, well, we're going to have this grant or this program. It's like, here's the entire view. Businesses need to survive, that short-term open their doors, and then thrive in the mid and long term as they optimize and they can exist. So what I love so much is it's a bold, ambitious plan. There's a lot of holes to still fill in, but it ties everything to a purpose. It doesn't say, hey, we're just going to dump out a whole bunch of money. Hopefully it finds the right people, they get it, and they survive. It ties that money in specific initiatives, whether it's workforce and training enhancements or retooling small businesses and helping them, as we've heard in multiple forums and things that have occurred. A lot of them just want to know, hey, what is it that I do to pivot to an e-commerce type ordering platform, or go touchless on my payments, or have good cybersecurity now that I'm doing so much remotely, or pay checks digitally and not have to sign them over each month. So I think this is really a groundbreaking approach to a toolbox that will be there for a community's lifeblood, the workforce and their small business. And I'm proud of everyone who's worked so hard to get us to this point. It's been difficult, to say the least, but it will, in the end, save people's jobs. It will save companies. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair. Staff, I just did a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of late nights, a lot of phone calls. So thank you, staff, for getting us going in the right direction. Councilmember Graham and Councilmember Johnson, any thoughts before we move to agenda item number 3?
No, I think the newest council member, Bakari, said it all. He had some new books, so I didn't know who that was. I didn't know who the hell that was. Good job, everybody.
I DJ on the weekends now.
Oh, God, that's really bad.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yeah, I'd just like to just ditto what everyone has said. This is exciting. We discovered at the very beginning that this was a health crisis, but a crisis for small businesses. So it's exciting to be a part of, the city and this team that's really addressing the needs that are out there. So I'm excited for the next step. Thank you to the staff of the city.
Mayor, any comments as we move to the next item, Mayor?
Well, I can mirror the excitement of all of the committee members in looking at this. There are a few things that I want to try to, figure out. One of our goals should always be to collaborate and avoid duplication of effort. I sent the committee chair and several others a note about collaboration with the state Commerce Department, and I think that includes Charlotte Works. And especially, I know that I spoke with Danielle, who chairs it, and they have a brand new beautiful facility that they've not been able to walk into. And when I think about the idea of the workforce and the retraining and all of those efforts, some of those are going to fall in a way that how do we supplement what the state's doing, or take it, or at least avoid or any duplication of effort with the state on that one. And I think the question about the phasing, I still want us to remember that the close contact businesses, those 5 segments of work areas, they're not going to be back for a while. And so when we're talking about doing this, and we're talking about the sole proprietorships or the barber shops where you're often, or the salon centrals where there are 40 or 50 people working inside of them, they're not going to be coming back, but I think they need a heads up. But I don't know if they're ready to know what the state boards of barber and beauticians are going to require yet. So let's remember, we do need to do some phasing as people come on board or come back to open their businesses again. And so those are some of the things that just came off the top of my head that we might want to look into. I also want to raise the issue of a lot of this we've talked about, marketplace and getting people back. I think one of the difficulties that we've had is that we don't have people, we have people working 2 and 3 jobs, and that's caused them to be, one, essential workers often in the service or healthcare industry. I think we need to look specifically in any of this workforce training that we do, that there is a minimum wage that allows people to be able to not have to live paycheck to paycheck and not pay their rent in a situation like this, put themselves in situations where they are more likely to become ill with the virus because of the type of work that they're doing, but yet the work's essential. And if we're going to put them in that position, I would like to really look at making sure that whatever we're asking people to do, that it's a wage that they can manage to live on. And there's a choice if you want to do more. But I'm feeling like in this effort, we've identified people that are making $8 and $10 an hour, and they're the ones that have to show up every day in this situation. And I know that our minimum wage is 16 and it's going to 17, I believe. And for the city organization, we ought to be requiring as much of others.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, staff. Tracy, who's going to take over for agenda item number 3?
I think we're going to invite in Kay Elmore, the leader.
Get out of here as well.
Thomas Powers as well. Mayor, thank you.
Like, we have another chair.
Oh, no. No. You go ahead, Thomas. No, I'm good. I've got agenda review at 3 o'clock.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, see you.
So committee, let me just level set, because I think we have 3 new members who I'm not sure is aware of the Charlotte Business Inclusion Program. So I wanted to use this meeting to kind of do an introduction and then talk about the work that's in progress and then have some discussion about next steps. So I know my vice chair and Councilmember Ashmere and Councilmember Johnson, this might be new. Councilmember Graham and I kind of, this is kind of an old hat, but it's a passion for both of us. And so please, Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Ashmere and Vice Chair, if you have any questions, don't hesitate, because this is some important work, not only what the staff is doing, but once again, it ties to our small business, the discussion we just had. And we have a great advisory council, CBIAC, Charlotte Business Inclusion Advisory Council, will work extremely hard with staff, and they have some recommendations they would like for us to adopt later on in the future meeting. So with that, do I turn it over to Phil? Yeah, Phil, thank you. Can you introduce your dream team?
I'm glad to. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Phil Rieger. I think most of you know who I am, but I'm your General Services Director. That's a somewhat of a new role for me. I was formerly your budget director, but I've transitioned over the past few months to General Services, and ultimately I'm the staff member accountable for the Charlotte Business Inclusion Program. And I am fortunate to have with me today Kay Elmore, who is our Chief Procurement Officer, and Thomas Powers, who's Senior Assistant Attorney, City Attorney. And so they're going to do the heavy lift today.
Okay.
But before I turn it over to them, I want to just put a little context in the room before we get to a program history, and some more information about our current work. Just in a global sense, I want to make the point that this Charlotte Business Inclusion Program is a component of a larger citywide strategy to grow small businesses, particularly small minority women businesses. The program leverages city contracting opportunities to grow MWSBEs, and it's designed specifically to address disparities and to promote inclusion, particularly in city contracting. Over the past 18 months, the city's been consolidating around its procurement and contracting efforts. And we've been doing that to improve efficiency and effectiveness. It's a part of our ongoing desire to improve city functions and programs. Last spring, CBI, which once was a division of finance, was reorganized under procurement. And it was done so very strategically. And it was done specifically to create a direct relationship between the program, CBI program, and the contracting efforts of the city, both from a construction contracting, subcontracting, but also just purchasing, buying goods and services. And then further, the city manager, as a part of his FY 2020 budget, reorganized or created the General Services Department, where he pulled the procurement division into and under the leadership of the General Services Director, which also includes the leadership around capital project implementation. And so those are capital project implementation is where the majority of the capital dollars are spent. And so now you're connecting CBI with the folks that are responsible for the contracting, with the folks that are responsible for making the decisions about the projects that we develop contracts for. You start to see the synergies that are created with the program. So this puts the CBI program and its goals and objectives sort of in the forefront of the minds of the leaders that are making some of the operational decisions around contracting and purchasing. Which we think makes us more able to meet the goals and objectives of City Council. And then finally, I want to talk about how this allows us to leverage our purchasing staff. It's not a secret that we have a few vacancies in the CBI program. And vacancies are not new to us. It's something that we deal with. But having CBI organized under procurement allows us to use our procurement agents, or to leverage our procurement agents, to fill in the gaps when we have them. And so that's how the work has continued. The work has never stopped. Even during COVID-19, the work continues. Kay will talk a little bit about some of those results from a contracting perspective. And so finally, just recognizing that I'm new leadership, so I'm kind of a fresh set of eyes. I'm really looking forward to working with this committee, specifically to continue to refine the program, look for opportunities to improve, implement recommendations of past disparity studies, but also future, and really define with this committee and with council what the goals and objectives look like, what success looks like, so that we make sure we define a program and we bring back the measures that can demonstrate success. And so with that said, let me turn it over to, let me go through real quick. If we could get to the first slide, the objective slide. Let me just review this real quick. We're going to give an overview of the purpose and history of the program. We're going to talk about disparity studies, specifically why we do them. Thomas is going to go through quickly some of the findings of the disparity study. We're going to talk about a schedule for the next disparity study. It's within the vision of the future. And then Kay we're going to turn it over to Kay, and she's going to talk about the status of the recommendations that have come out of the 2017 disparity study and highlight some of those wins and strategies that we're currently experiencing. And then finally, talk about next steps for CBI policy development, particularly how we would move policy through committee and on to council. So with that, let me turn it over to Thomas Powers.
All right, if we can turn to the next slide. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, again, Thomas Powers, Senior Assistant City Attorney on behalf of your City Attorney, Patrick Baker. I'm here to give a background and kind of institutional information on the CBI program before turning over to Kay, who's going to kind of give you information, like I said, present to future. So in that regard, again, CBI, as Phil has alluded to, is part of the Small Business Development and Growth Strategy. This program is based on, again, 13 counties that this council has actually designated as part of our metropolitan consolidated actual statistical area. So when we're talking about the CBI program and we're talking about the actual regional area, we're talking about not only Mecklenburg County, but 12 other counties, including 2 in South Carolina, Lancaster and York, that are part of where we're spending most of our dollars. This statistical area, combined statistical area is basically where we're spending about 80% of all of our dollars based on the disparity study. So that's how we came up with that actual 13 counties. Again, CBI is monitoring contract and goals commitments, overseeing the policy and procedures, and doing training and partnering again with economic development. Next slide, please. So again, going back through the history of the CBI program, we've had variations over the last 40 years in regards to the current CBI program. Back during the 1980s until the early 2000 era, we had what was called a Minority Women Business Development Program. That program, again, was in effect, and it was challenged in about 2002, and the council then decided to actually dismantle the program due to an outdated disparity study. But in its stead, we actually allowed for a small business opportunity program after receiving authorization from the state. That then moved us to the next era, which was, again, the small business program between 2003 and 2013. That program, again, was not a race-conscious or gender-conscious program. Again, we looked at all businesses from a race-neutral and gender-neutral perspective. Then, starting around 2013, that is when Council adopted the new CBI policy. This current policy is based on a race-conscious as well as gender-conscious program that was based on, at that time, the 2011 disparity study. We have completed, again, a 2017 disparity study, and at that time, we did show that there was an issue of disparity amongst women as well as minorities, and that allowed us to continue to have a race-conscious and gender-conscious program. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay. So let me answer the quick question of what is a disparity study. Again, a disparity study goes into examining the number of minority and women-owned businesses and if they are being utilized at a level that is at least 80% or more. Again, disparity gives us the legal authority to actually have MBE goals or WBE goals on contracts. So for instance, if you happen to have a minority group, let's say we're going to use, in this instance, Hispanic-oriented businesses, if they happen to be utilized at a rate of 85% of the not only availability but also the utilization, that is not disparity for all intents and purposes. As such, they would not then be able to be utilized for MBE goals on city contracts. If they are at 79% to 0%, then that is where we have disparity, and the law allows us to actually implement minority-oriented goals, or, if necessary, women-oriented goals as well. Typically, disparity studies are every 5 years. Now, you can have a disparity study that goes beyond 5 years, but as I alluded to in the previous slide, we had a situation where we were challenged for having a disparity study that was 10 years old, and that led to us, again, dismantling the program. So when you get beyond 5 years, you're kind of getting into the yellow, slightly red zone where if we were legally challenged, a judge could then say, I do not believe your disparity study is actually up to date to justify a program. Remember, a disparity study is a snapshot of the market at the time in which we're doing the study. So it is necessary for us to go back every so often, every 5 years, theoretically, to make sure we get a more updated snapshot in that regard. And again, our current CBI program, based on race-conscious and gender-conscious measures, are set to expire on January 1st of 2023. And that's because of the disparity study that this council adopted back in in 2017. All right, next slide. Thank you. This slide here provides you with an understanding of how we were able to legally justify disparity. What you're seeing before you is a goals versus no goals slide, and what it basically is indicating in regards to what will be the black graph bars is when the council went into the market and then set goals on contracts. Now, this is not in a situation where you're just setting only MBE goals, but this is where the council is setting SBE goals, MBE goals, or WBE goals. I would like to kind of denote this as more the experimental group. Now, what you're also going to see on this graph as well is the no goals actual utilization, which is in gray. That is your control group. And what our consultant did back in 2017 was look at our experimental group versus our control group, and they came to the conclusion that because the City of Charlotte, when they're utilizing S goals, M goals, as well as WBE goals, that they are actually creating and supporting the utilization of small women minority businesses. Whereas when the city did not go into the market with any kind of experiment, so to speak, the control group showed that the market responded back with less than optimal utilization of small minority women and women businesses. And as such, because of this, this was a basis for the consultant to indicate that we had the legal authority to continue using women and minority goals going forward, because that actually promotes those businesses in our contracts and brings us closer to parity. Next slide, please. With that, I'm going to kind of just go over some of the disparity study findings. One of the things that our consultant recommended was an annual aspirational goal of 20.9%. I want to emphasize that the aspirational goal is something that is not changeable. It cannot be increased or decreased based on a contract. As such, if we have a situation where a contract has no disparity, we cannot then set a 14% arbitrary goal in that instance. We would just have to set an aspirational goal of 20.9%, and then the actual contractor or proposer would then do what they could to possibly meet that aspirational. But there would not be the penalty that we have under our CBI policy where we're actually setting hard goals. So going back to our program, when Kay and the CBI staff actually put forth a goal that is looked at and adopted by council in a contract, that is because Kay's group is able to look at and determine what is the availability of those businesses and said this is how we actually come up with that goal. That number allows her to then have the remedy section of liquidated damages for failure to meet the goal or to reject the bid for council's sake. But when you're having aspirational, you're saying that we don't have actual disparity, but we're asking you to help us try to achieve this long-term aspirational aspect and goal for the organization. Again, the MWSB subcontracting, this is where we're again expanding the use. I think Kay will get into a lot of that with her presentation as well. We're looking at, again, the designated contract strategy of how we go about not only looking at our firms for businesses, but how do we make sure we're actually supporting those businesses. We looked at and explored the SBE certification and eligibility, but MBE, as I'll explain, is a different animal. Mandatory contract and also our data software. Next slide, please. With that being said, I want to kind of quickly run down the actual status of the committee recommendations. This includes your CBIAC committee as well as the former Economic Development Committee's recommendations that were adopted. In essence, we had a few items that came forth. One was the 24 hours to finalize Form 3. This will allow a contractor who is actually going through the hard bid process of trying to get bids as part of their actual bid package, if they can get a verbal commitment for the actual engagement, instead of having them to try to jot this all down and submit it at the time of bid, we gave them 24 hours after the fact to actually put the information on paper to submit. Both the CBIAC and Economic Development agreed with that. Again, we changed the breaking down work, good faith effort from 15 to 10. Negotiate in good faith, also from 15 points to 10 points. We increased the duration of the SBE certification from 3 years to 4, and lowered the threshold from $300,000 to $200,000 in regards to setting of any goals on a contract. We're also having the aspect of breaking out our MBEs from SBEs in regards to counting towards a contract. Now, I want to kind of explain this because it sounds easy, but it's kind of convoluted. Right now, what we're doing in our contracts, if you happen to have a MWBE who is also an SBE on a contract, we're allowing the prime to count that dual certified firm towards both goals.
Right.
Now what we're going to be doing, again, based on council's adoption, is splitting it out where if a firm is both MWBE certified as well as SBE certified, then the firm can only be applicable to one of those two goals.
Got it.
So that would, again, increase utilization, increase actually additional business being on there.
Hey, Thomas?
Yes, sir.
So first of all, thank you so much, because I think this is very important when we talk about our program. Understanding the legal aspect of the program, what can we defend. So on the fourth bullet point that the CBIAC recommend, so lower construction subcontracting threshold from $300,000 to $200,000. Does that still make that informal, or is that a total conversation? You know, we have formal contracts and informal.
So for construction purposes, that is still the informal range.
Okay.
Under state law, that is $500,000 or more.
Okay.
So there's again, kind of a weird situation where state law requires $500,000 for a formal, but they require also goals to be set at $300,000 under state law. So what we're doing is taking it down to $200,000, where even at the informal range, you still could have goals set, even though it may not be at the formal range.
And I think for committee members, that utilization, dropping that to $200,000, allows some companies to bid, because sometimes bonding becomes an issue on larger projects. So dropping that threshold to $200,000, thank you, staff. Hopefully get more small business to participate. So appreciate that.
Not hearing any additional questions, we can go to the next slide here.
Yeah.
And just to quickly, again, there was a few recommendations that were brought forth by both CBIAC and both CBIC and former Economic Development disagreed with those recommendations, and so they will remain currently as in the current policy. We also did not bring forth anything regarding the establishment and personal net worth for MWBEs, and as Kay will kind of explain later, there's a legal issue there, as well as the duration and registration. At the bottom, you'll see that a lot of this is because the MWBE certification is handled by the state, and that's something where the city would not be able to step on the state's authority in that regard. The expanded contracts, we're actually having pending legal review in regards to the mechanics of that program.
So, look, committee, let me make a point. As Thomas has shared with us, the first recommendation on the first slide was the CBIAC advisory. They have adopted those over a year ago. And so I'm going to take full responsibility as chair to saying we have not forwarded those to city council. So staff, if you all are comfortable, maybe in the June timeframe of our next meeting, that we would like to then try to get that on the council calendar for approval, the CBIAC recommendation. Because if you look, I think we kind of lock in step. Yes, from their support, and yes, from the committee. I would say, committee members, if you have any heartburn with this slide, please let me know. But this advisory committee has worked extremely hard, and we don't want to send a message that all their hard work, that we, the committee or council, do not take it seriously. So, Tracy, we can tee that up and feel.
Yeah, we've got a slide that speaks to a schedule that we think is realistic as possible, but we can talk a little bit more about it when we put it up and maybe negotiate a little bit on what that schedule really looks like.
Thank you. Well, I'll be quiet. Go right ahead.
All right. Next slide, please. Just to make sure that the committee is well aware, at this time we're in the midst of our 5 years for the current disparity study, which means we need to gear up for the next disparity study. This slide is just giving you a tentative schedule as to when we would kick that off. It is going to start in late third quarter of 2020, with the thought that we will bring this back with the actual report and consultant presenting it to council around third quarter of 2022, and go through undertaking the process of modifications to the policy, any public input, and council adoption of those revisions to the policy in the fall of 2022, fourth quarter of 2022. So that way we'll have the entire policy adopted and ready to go before your current MWBE race conscious and gender conscious program expires. So just kind of giving you that outline. With that, I'll turn it over to Kay.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Thomas. So, well, you know, we're so happy to be here. I think the last time we gave an update to the full council was back in January, and Thomas has done a good job of sort of laying out everything that's been in the disparity study findings and the recommendations. If we could maybe move up one slide for the group, one more, please. So, as you can see, we have a number of policy provisions that are laid out, as well as those recommendations. I think that the committee can read through those. And what I want to be able to talk about, without necessarily doing a one-for-one of these, are the actions that we've been taking. Right. Your CBI team, in collaboration with economic development and others across the city, have been working incredibly hard to make impactful changes. And so some of the things that we're doing, we're talking about goal setting, or subcontracting goals. We're working very hard to unbundle contracts. When you talk about informal and formal contracts, our CBI team is reviewing every opportunity beginning at $50,000 for those opportunities. We're also hustling to try and make sure that this program is not just about subcontracting, but every prime that we can bring through the door and get awarded a contract is really critical for success for our MWSB firms. We're also looking at how do we separate out various types of goals between the minority goals and the small business goals and those types of things that Thomas has really talked about, because many of our MWSB vendors, they are both. They are minority and are small or some combination of that. And so, again, our objectives really are to tear the business apart in such a way so that we can scope it properly, we can look at availability of those vendors, and then we can match them appropriately with just right contracts. And so the actions that we're taking are all designed to really continue to help our MWSB firms grow, develop, and move along a spectrum of sustainability to get stronger, and to, as Tracy was talking about, not just survive but thrive. And so working together to collaborate on all these programs is really vital. If we can go one more slide, I'll be happy to answer any individual questions. But some of the other things that we're doing is we talk about creating targeted opportunities for SBEs only. Some of this also talks about our how we actually reach out, look for those opportunities and say, hey, you know what? I want to do business with minorities only for this, or I want to look at our small business firms to make sure that they have an opportunity without having to compete with larger primes when it's applicable, and that's normally in those informal ranges. We've got some policy provisions around SBE and MWB certification and eligibility. The component of that we really have any control over is SBE only. The state is really in charge of how they designate out personal network thresholds for M's and W's. And so if they make those changes, we will certainly follow suit, but we will also focus very strongly on how we manage our SBE groups. If we continue on down, some of the other things that, back one, if you will, please. So one of the things that we've been talking about for a really long time is the importance of our diversity management software, being able to measure and track for success. And so that came up as a provision that we wanted to look at, and over the past year and a half we have been diligently implementing our B2G Now software, which is officially known as Inclusion CLT.
Oh, Inclusion CLT.
Inclusion CLT. And so you're going to see that come into play very heavily when we begin talking about reporting data, the next disparity study, and where we end up in utilization annually going forward. I think in all of these categories of provisions, it is about
effectively focusing on how we advocate, how we assist, how we support our MWSB firms. And so, again, whether we're talking about unbundling or targeting or advocating or training, those are all the types of things that our group is working on to assist, and those line up very nicely with the recommendations that were previously a part of our last disparity study that will continue to move us forward into the program and then be captured in our next version of the policy.
So Kate, the one I'm excited about, we can go back to one slide, is the unbundling of contracts, because I think that's just key when it helps for utilization. Any success stories you would like to share so far as an example?
So you were there, one of the biggest success stories we've ever had in 21 years back in January when we successfully were able to actually award to two MSBE firms as part of our office supplies contracts. And so what we're really seeing when we begin to unbundle, we are actually working in new areas that we've never worked. Our MWSB spend should not just be in construction.
Right.
We're able to begin to bring those into play in commodities, in technology, in engineering and professional services. And so that is really exciting for us to be able to almost, if you will, create new businesses. When we look out into our environment of vendors, we're able to now identify where we have some need, whether we're talking about plumbing or masonry or steel or terrazzo or glass or glazing, and identify firms who are out here doing it that we need to connect and get certified and get them to work. And so the ability to unbundle for them, if you're a small business or a minority-owned business that you're not quite ready yet, unbundling the contracts based on scope so that you can actually get your foot in the door and then begin that process of getting experience, training, make those connections until you continue to move down that spectrum of economic mobility. So we're feeling very good about the unbundling of contracts piece. And I think, again, that ties into our work of if something comes through the door, there are 3 or 4 things that we're doing. If a department wants to work on a contract that's $50,000, I'm going to review it at that. I'm going to, if it comes through the door, and we're going to take a look at it. And then we are limiting the number of waivers that we do.
Okay.
And we are going to be working on implementing what I call a low and no goals committee review, which is if we believe there are opportunities that the departments might not know about, then we will jump out, that we'll collaborate and partner with them to enforce that opportunity to set those goals and actually award those contracts. So incredibly excited about that.
Thank you. Now go to the data tracking and reporting, because I can remember several small business would approach council members and say, I have not received payment yet. Mm-hmm. So would this software kind of address some of those issues when the prime hasn't paid the small business? It will allow us to track and see who's actually have received a payment?
Absolutely. So that is one of the transitions that we've been working on this past year, where we've been having departments step up and also the primes get into that system, us connecting on exactly what is paid for work, and then our MWSB firms get in that same system and say, yes, I've been paid, or no, I have not been paid, or I was paid, but that's not the right amount.
Okay.
And so those are the kind of things that we're going to continue to push out with training, helping them understand how to use the system and have that impact so that we know sooner where there are issues that we can help with in terms of payment, maybe implement some quick pay opportunities. Some of our MWSBs struggle through 30-day net and those types of things, and or if the prime gets paid, so the city will pay the prime, but the primes pay the subs. And so looking for those opportunities to ensure that all of our vendors are paid, but particularly our prime and sub MWSB firms.
No, thank you.
So let me push forward just a little bit. Go to the next slide, please. Let's just go ahead and do one more, because I'll just say this briefly. On the last slide, any of the recommendations that CBIAC has supported and previously Economic Development, now WBDC, we have already developed those into a draft version of the policy. Those sections are referenced on page 14. So we have already gotten those in and have an opportunity to review those and talk more about those as we go forward. So I'd like to just go ahead to the next slide because I know that we're short on time. So again, I want to really talk about the overall strategies that we have for MWSB firms. So we're really focused on increasing and exceeding utilization goals with more contract awards. And so we're pushing to make sure that we not only meet the established goals, that we exceed these. And in lots of instances, or whenever it happens, if a vendor comes in low, we will work however long we have before council award to get them to move further along into that process to meet and exceed those goals, and our staff is committed to do that. We sit through a number of appeals and situations where we have that opportunity to work with them and say, let's get out there and hit that goal and beat it if you can. So staff is hyper-focused on that. We are also championing access to both prime and subcontract opportunities. I know the program is based on subcontracting opportunities, but I believe so strongly in our MWSB firms in the prime capacity. And so I think it's really critical that we're seeking those opportunities because some of our MWSB firms who are in a prime position, they're leading the way. Right. And we need them to take that leadership very seriously and pull the rest of us along. That's right. We're also looking at creating paths for non-standard entry for diverse firms to participate. There are a number of firms that over the past few months, they have previously not been given opportunities to actually win awards. We've been able to work with departments and things as simple as engineering on pipe, commodities, technology, those types of things. We're coming forward with those awards, and it's making a huge difference. We're also working really hard to create diversity and inclusion advocates across the city. We're connecting our procurement people with our DEI folks across the city so that we're shoulder to shoulder, working towards having a positive impact. And this applies the same sort of the partnership collaboration that we have with economic development, Tracy's group. Just anybody who has this passion work to do, we're bringing everybody together for impact. We're also working really hard and collaborating with our community partners in terms of training. We believe it's important to continue to create what we call an MWSB pipeline. So whether we're talking about the UPTCP trained base for vocational schools, masonry courses and welding courses at CPCC, Johnson C. Smith inclusive procurement training program, and then our homegrown programs such as AMP Up, we're working really hard on that training. And we're seeing the impacts of that. We've actually seen people go through these courses who are winning awards, getting contracts, and getting more business and going on to be more and more successful. So if we could go forward one slide. So this is always one of my favorite slides.
Here we go.
I think we had one of these in January. So we've been watching very closely as we've been implementing these changes, and we've been looking for that impact. And so just since January, the council has approved more than $72 million in contracts to MWSBs.
Since January?
Since January. Wow. So if we stay on par with that record, we are set to have an amazing year in terms of actual awards to MWSBs and hopefully money in their pockets as we continue to grow the program. We've been, yes.
Can that number be broken down by ethnic groups, minority, African Americans, Indian, women-owned business, etc.?
Yes, it can be.
Can we get that, please?
Absolutely. We can break that down both by prime and sub, and then the unique groups that were awarded.
I think that would be, that's the final exam, right?
Good point, Councilman Graham.
I had to do it.
Absolutely. We've been incredibly excited also to include our MWSB firms in the COVID-19 community response. Just over the last few weeks, I've ordered more than $550,000 in PPE supplies from them, which that is, again, a new category of work that we're doing with MWSBs. They traditionally, as you know, Councilmember Mitchell, when you have to bid, when you have to do low bids in an emergency situation, we're looking to these firms. They have these supplies, and we're automatically making those connections. I would expect that we would spend several $1 million with them over the next coming months. We're also working on continuing to increase our certifications.
There we go.
Currently have the highest in the history of the program. And while Mr. Mitchell has previously indicated that I can certify somebody in an hour,
I did put that pressure on you.
I wish that were true. We have again continued to decrease that from 7 days in January to 5 right now, and that is continuing to improve with some of the automated processes we have in place with our diversity management software. We're continuing to work on auditing our prime payments. Again, this is part of diversity management software where we can actually see what's going into the system in terms of what we're paying out for primes and then what they're paying out for subs. And then finally, we had a huge effort with the CBI-AC, and we're able to to determine a number of firms where we actually have an immediate need for someone. Some examples of that I called out before, but we're looking for firms that can do masonry, plumbing, steel, fire suppression, terrazzo, glass, glazing, dumpsters, concrete builders. Those are some of the primary categories of services, types of vendors that we need, and our staff in CBI is already reaching out to actually begin certifying. I think as of last week, I think we had certified 4 or 5 of those companies already.
So 3 quick points, if I may, committee. One, I agree with Councilman Graham, the big $72 million. Just going forward, we can always get the breakdown. It's great to have the overall number, but the question we'll get in the community, how many women own, how many minority own. So I think the breakdown is helpful. The 4th bullet point, Kay, you know, I've been a big fan of yours of taking from 7 days to 5 days because that's been a big issue in the community. Why is it taking so long to get certified for your program? So thank you very much. And then the last bullet point, I think to work with our advisory council means a lot. We ask people to serve on our committees, but to take their input and to partner with them to solve a policy issue, I think is just great collaboration. So who's staffing the CBI-AC now?
So we're all part of that right now. Eric is in lead after Sam's departure. Okay. They've been an amazing group to work with, incredibly active, amazing, creative ideas. Okay. And so we've been very pleased and blessed to have them on our side. So
keep up the good work. And I know especially CBIC kind of special to me. It started as an advisory group, and then we made it to a permanent council committee. So
absolutely.
And my committee is very quiet, so I think that's a good thing. Okay. No questions so far. Go ahead.
Okay, so then moving forward to the next slide, please. So we are currently working and finalizing our FY spend achievements for this year. We should be ready to finalize report out. I think one of the last things that we have to do is look at our DBE spend, but we are looking at our 5th year straight of increased spending with MWSBEs right now. They're running final numbers on this, but our new record is $128 million and some change. That's roughly about $27 million more than the previous year.
Wow. Let me repeat that again. So we had increased our spending from $27 million from 2018. Mm-hmm. Great. Okay.
Yep. And so, again, we'll be finalizing that in the next few weeks and should actually have that in a report by the end of this fiscal year. Again, we've got to go back and include our DBE components, which are roughly close to being finished right now. So we expect that number to increase and the inclusion overall to increase.
Wow.
So next slide, please. So we've had lots of discussion about policy and recommendations from the disparity study and those things that both the CBI, AC, and previously Economic Development Committee reviewed and approved. And so I know, Mr. Mitchell, you and I had a conversation several months ago about some of the things that we were hearing about policy. We absolutely need to move forward with those modifications to the policy. But one of the things that we were cognizant of was concern from both our prime and MWSB vendors that that it was a challenge to get through the policy as it exists.
Okay.
The policy is you've got the foundational components, but you have it is primarily procedure.
Okay.
And so we have been working over the last few months to rewrite the policy so that we can actually include those approved recommendations. We want to also talk about how we define and develop success measures. We've got to get the policy streamlined for ease of use to ensure that all of our vendors understand it and they can comply. And then we actually want to have a condensed policy and a separate procedure guide that will allow us to make changes on the fly however we need to. Most of what came out of the disparity study is really their procedural improvements. And so we feel like we can be more effective if we can change how the policy is set up. And we will continue to be able, as things come up where we have opportunities to make those changes, we'll do it procedurally and hopefully be more effective and efficient in growing the program. So we have laid out the tentative schedule that Phil mentioned previously. So we are really looking at, over the next 60 days to finalize schedule of reviews, moving out potentially into August for follow-up with full city council, and then implementation to September. However, we do understand that you have asked that we want to go about that a little bit quicker. We will absolutely work to that. And I think for us, some of the challenges might be the summer schedule. RNC may impact that. Then, of course, some of the issues related to COVID-19. But we will absolutely do everything we can to continue to move that forward as expeditiously as possible.
So Phil called it negotiate.
Sure.
I'm going to use another term. Let's make sure we can work quicker for the small business community, okay? And so, committee, I'm more comfortable if we take the CBIC recommendations been out there over a year. If we could bring them forth to City Council in June to vote on, the ones that was on the slide is showing CBIAC said yes. The previous committee said yes. And so if we can get that teed up for our committee meeting in June, I just want my new committee to be more comfortable and then go into council in June for full adoption on the 6 that we showed on the slide. So I'm trying to divide them up. I think those have been out there for quite some time, and I just want to make sure we get those out in the market, particularly the $200,000 threshold. I think is very key. We're talking about getting more participation.
So the distinction is that there's we're attempting to rewrite the policy in a way that's streamlined, and it's not a small effort.
Right.
We are streamlining a 50-page, 80-page policy / procedural document to a potential 10-page policy with a procedural guide. And so I think we can accomplish what you're trying to accomplish by pulling out and saying, here are the recommendations that are going to go into that policy, and then we can work through the process of finalizing the policy, getting that back to this committee, reviewed to council, and then on into implementation. And so that's what this intends to do, but I absolutely will bring that back.
Okay. If you all don't mind. Okay. I think it gives a lot just credibility and confidence in the community that this is there. And I like we look at the slide. You guys have already identified on slide 14. You identified where the changes will be made in the policy. So staff, you like you already done the legwork. So just get this committee comfortable on what the impact of those changes would mean. So it would be nice at the June meeting. Let's take, for example, the threshold. How many other small business could we utilize dropping the threshold to $200,000? And so there's example. I like give bidders 24 hours to finalize the form. I think, that means expedite that process. So if you can bring it back in, and the big one, and staff, here's I would like for you all to really dig in. I think Vice Chair, you and I had some previous conversations about good faith effort. Really understand what good faith effort is, the point system, and the impact. Thomas, so just give my new members an example. If good faith efforts are met legally, then what governs City Council if we try to give the contract to somebody else?
Sure. In regards to your good faith efforts, our CBI policy is based on 10 statutorily required good faith efforts. Our point system is a little bit more than what the state requires, which is allowed. But once a bidder has met the minimum number of points, which is 50 in our CBI policy, then they have met the necessary efforts to actually be awarded the contract. So the way the legal system has developed good faith efforts, you either meet the goal, which means you're going to the market and actually can find the businesses and have them to be part of your contract, or you have this other alternate option, which is you do everything under the sun to try to meet the goal, but for whatever reason you couldn't, and it shows that you tried to go out there and solicit those businesses to meet the actual government's request for utilization. So once you have shown that through our point system, then a bidder should be awarded the contract in regards to showing that they have complied as much as possible with the program.
In the real conversation committee, sometimes we see it in the city council agenda, and we get various council members that the utilization was only 8% and the goal was 18%. And then clearly, though, that awardee has met the good faith effort. And so council get frustrated, but legally, they've done everything we asked them to do. So I just want the committee to really get caught up to speed on the good faith effort, the point system. So I'm going to shut up. Any questions from the committee? Any comments? Okay. So our next meeting is the second Monday in June. What's our regular schedule? It's the second Monday.
It's new world we're living in. I need to go back and look at the schedule.
So look, I think it's the second Monday in June, but Tracy, if you don't mind looking at the schedule and just confirm. Councilmember Johnson, thank you. Councilmember Johnson, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I have a question overall, and this might be for Tracy. So we're the Small Business Committee, or excuse me, Workforce Economic Development Committee, which has a different mission, if you will, than the Small Business Task Force. We know that, and I love the discussion and the comprehensive plan for the future of Charlotte and jump-starting the economy. But what do we say to those businesses, the small businesses who could not pay their May rent? Or we know that some of the small business owners have not gotten any assistance from the PPP. They weren't initially eligible for unemployment, so there could feasibly be business owners out there who have not received any assistance or any income since this crisis started. So what do we say to those businesses? Is that being addressed by the Small Business Task Force? Can we speak to that so that we, as this committee, don't appear to be tone deaf to what's going on in the community?
I think what we were trying to do is absolutely address that in the survive component. And we were trying to do it in multiple ways. If you go back and remember where I mentioned the grant programs under survive, that was absolutely for that. I did not, and staff did not put dollar amounts to it. I think that's more discussed amongst the task force. But that is a significant and critical component of the survive piece of it. And if you remember what I said in it when we talked about them, is that the target of those would be companies that have not yet received assistance. And so we are trying to prioritize ones that haven't received assistance. So it's absolutely a huge component under the survive platform.
So the timeline for that survive platform is, did I see 7 weeks for that?
No, I would tell you, Councilmember Johnson, Vice Chair and I, and Mayor Pro Tem and Dimple, it's not going to take us 7 weeks to bring something back to council.
No. What we had said, for example, in the micro business grants, 3 to 5 weeks to approve and award funds, and that's conservative. Again, there's contractual things that we need to do with LISC if they remain our partner, but the goal is getting this out the door as fast as possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Staff, great job. The good news, fiscal 2019 report, we think we'll have that wrapped up by the end of this fiscal year. Fantastic. And then we look forward to seeing you June on the CBIC recommendations. Ooh, one more. And wait a minute. Vice Chair, yes, sir?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to add along the lines of those last questions, and I think I could probably speak on your behalf as well, Mr. Chair, because we've discussed this a lot. I think today and tomorrow is a big milestone for the community, for everyone listening. There's been a lot of heads down, a lot of collaboration we had to build some kind of framework, some kind of playbook, right? Because what we didn't want to do was start executing one thing and say, okay, we did that thing, we executed another thing, and then a couple months passed, and then we just did 15 things, they don't connect, and we didn't end up making an impact. So I think what we did here was this marks a milestone of we've kind of got this playbook, or we're going to make tweaks around the edges, we're going to figure out the budgetary pieces and they align. But one thing is that I hope after today and tomorrow we see a switching of gears where all of a sudden everyone's like, that's the direction we're marching. Right. Now staff, Tracy, Fran, all those folks, they can hit the ground running and they're not necessarily waiting on 7 approvals of 7 different things. We as the committee members can all do the same. I think that's really important. So when small businesses or people who need workforce support and help out there are looking at this, I think we have hit a very important point right now that is going to enable us to have a rapid deployment of support that they're going to start seeing in execution mode that are going to take, in many cases, days, not weeks or months, as they start rolling out and they start seeing those things. So this was necessary to get us to this point, but I think that that things are going to start moving really, really fast, and our community can now look to the city for the kind of support that is directly in our wheelhouse.
Great job, Vice Chair. Tracy?
I just wanted to piggyback a little bit with what Councilmember Bakari was saying, because he hit the nail on the head. From a staff standpoint, we've been reacting a lot, and why it was really important for us to lay out a strategy so we can implement. We've got to get to this implementation, and if we're bringing one initiative to get forward at a time, it's very inefficient for us to be able to prioritize and implement. And so the importance of the strategy, thinking about right now, but also thinking a little bit into the future, was to allow us to for the things that are on the Thrive End, some runway to start to shape and implement, but then the ability to execute today on the Survive or tomorrow on the Survive things and get that moving. And then consistently continue to collaborate with you all. But we've got a framework that is it's that whole quilt work, if you will.
Staff, thank you. Looking forward to, it's June 8th. It's on my agenda.
Okay, thank you.
June 8th at 2 o'clock. Thank you, Denard. Last but not least, this is Small Business Month, and Ms. Christy Floyd has a lot of activities that she wants to educate this committee and council on small business activities. Ms. Floyd, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Go right ahead.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for inviting me to give an update on Small Business Month. We're really excited that we still have some activities planned. We weren't able to get together for our annual Small Business Month kickoff event to celebrate our small businesses in person, but we're still celebrating virtually all month. So we're really excited about that. I wanted to tell you a little bit about our 31 Days of Biz campaign. We do this every year, and it's our way of spotlighting our local small businesses. We spotlight one business every day for the whole month of May. So be sure to follow Charlotte Business Resources on our social media, and you can see who the business is for today. These businesses were nominated by our resource partners, and we're really excited to get to share with everyone all the good things that they're doing. On May the 12th, we have a Survive and Thrive webinar. It is our partnership with the Entrepreneurs Organization. That is a national organization. We're partnering with our Charlotte chapter to put this webinar on. It is in partnership with the National Black MBA Association of Charlotte, and it's their way of asking the city to help them get more minority business owners involved in their accelerator program. Also, on May the 20th, we're going to do our kickoff of AMP Up, the AMP Up monthly webinar series. My colleague, Jerry and Jackson, has been working very hard to put this together. So in addition to the AMP Up curriculum, she's designed this webinar series to help the students in AMP Up stay connected to their 3-year growth plan. And she's worked with the AMP Up Advisory Committee to come up with topics for these webinars. The first one you'll see is coming up in May. Atrium Health is the partner on that. And then there'll be more webinars throughout the summer. So other than that, we do have a billboard, again, uptown outside of the epicenter. You'll see the graphic over there on your right. That is what you'll see on the billboard. hopefully some folks walking around downtown will spot it, take a picture for me, and send it to me. I'm not getting downtown very much these days, but hopefully some of you guys will see it when you're out and about. So we're really excited to get to continue to celebrate our small businesses throughout the month of May. We appreciate you following us on social media and retweeting and reposting our posts for 31 Days of Biz. And we look forward to getting together with everyone as soon as possible to celebrate in person.
Christy, thank you so much for your work. Are there any questions from the committee?
I need help picking up trash. Can you help me with that, Jay?
Councilmember Graham. No.
My neighbors are killing me, man.
Hey, Councilman Graham, we'll talk offline. We'll get a solution to your problem.
Yeah. Trash pickup, Tracy. Help.
Committee, thank you all so much for joining us. Staff, thank you for the great reports. And this meeting is adjourned, and see everyone at 5 o'clock.